We're going to go through a hip internal rotation, PAILS and rails setup, biasing the hip in hip abduction. So for this, you're going to need a box, and I recommend using a stick or being somewhere near that you can support yourself. So the stick helps just to hold balance when you're in this exercise, as we'll be here for a little time. So in terms of the setup, okay, to abduct the hip, we would get the leg up on a box as so. You can play with the height of the box, okay? So this height generally works really well for me. I'm able to get quite close to my end range for hip abduction, but then I can also maneuver myself to get a good internal rotation stretch. So internal rotation would be our ability to, say, perform this exercise, okay? So my ability to internally rotate would be to do this movement. On the box, what I want to do is bring myself towards my end range. So there's quite a few variables you can play with this box setup, which I like. I'm gonna go down to medium. I've set my leg up on the box. I've got a 90-degree angle at my knee joint, and I've actually got my foot supported on the box as well, okay? This is a very limited position in the sense that I can't play as much with, say, maybe knee and ankle rotation. I can't play too much with maybe bending the knee that easily. So a few modifications you can do is to actually let this leg slide off a little bit. Then I have a bit more freedom to open or close the knee angle with maybe not so much knee discomfort or tension felt there. So I can play with opening and closing the knee a bit more, but also with the foot slightly off, I can allow the ankle to relax, and it just sinks a little bit into a comfortable position, which for me feels a little bit more internally rotated. So when I had the leg up here, this biased my knee a lot more into external rotation, whereas when I'm here, it just sinks into a comfortable position, taking any knee discomfort out of the equation, I generally find. Then, to get the stretch, I want to turn my upper body. I'm twisting my pelvis essentially over my femur, over my hip bone. Okay, as I do that, I'm loading myself into position. So if I try now to externally rotate and I try to lift off, you can see I can't. I'm indicating here that I'm near my end range, okay? Another way is to be mindful as you're going through this rotation motion, twisting your pelvis is what you do with pelvis or hip extension flexion. So I could flex a little bit of the hip and then load the rotation. That will create a very different feeling quite deep inside the joint versus, say, extending through the hip and then keeping that hip extension as I rotate and load. Again, it still targets a very similar area, just slightly different. One variation might actually work for you, whereas the others won't. So explore, try to find out what with all these variables gives you a good line of tension. One note before I get started with an example round is for taller people than myself, say, you might find a box like this height is a bit too low, in which case you may need to elevate this leg a little bit more, so stacking something up on here. And today I'm demonstrating with a soft box versus a hard wooden box. And again, I find the cushioning underneath the joints sometimes makes a difference to how effective things might feel, how comfortable things might feel as well. So, assuming that we've found a comfortable position now, I'm going to run through an example of a PAILS and rails set. So, I assume I've held here for a couple of minutes. PAILS contraction will be to rotate into the box. So imagine there's a scale under my knee, underneath my ankle. I'm pushing with these joints, with the leg, but more emphasis of pushing down with the ankle to try and create more of a hip external rotation effect. So it's coming from here as best as possible, okay? And I'm thinking to create this movement, pushing down with my ankle, but not letting the knee, say, come off. I'm still pushing down with the whole leg, but more emphasis on the ankle. I'll build that up, 20, 40, 60, get to my safest and greatest effort, and then hold for 20 to 30 seconds. Rails would be the opposite, so I'm in my end range, but the intention would be to try and internally rotate further without any compensation. So you want to think, keep this pelvis still, and then from here, trying to move this leg bone independently from your pelvis. I'm trying to internally rotate. Think that scale that was underneath the ankle, I want that scale now to read 0 as best as possible, and I'm keeping this knee down, and I'm doing my best to try and hold that effort. I'm thinking about contracting quite a lot of the deep glute minimus medius muscles that live on the side of the hip here, just above the bone, to help hold that effort. I will hold that for a similar amount of time. 20 seconds or so, and then slowly soften that contraction, and then assess, see how it feels. Some people generally find just by relaxing, that will naturally sink into a deeper stretch without having to change anything. If you find you don't, you may be able to explore by turning your upper body again a bit towards that rear leg, playing with all the variables again, maybe closing the knee, changing something to see how it feels as you go deeper into the joint.